Yeah, welcome back, everybody. If you weren't here at session 1, we'll have a short recap, but this is session 2, law and theory and evidence and bias. So the key verses are Proverbs 36 and Romans 1:20, Psalm 139:14, and Colossians 1:17. But before we get too far into it, some of you may be new, maybe you don't know me. For those of you who do, you can take a 1-minute nap. My name is Jay Palko. I'm on the Connect ministry team, and I've been here for about a couple of years, COVID transfer, as we discussed last time. But yeah, it's been an awesome experience, great group of people, and happy to have this chance to speak here today. I'm a father of 2, an engineer of over 20 years. I have my bachelor's and master's in engineering, and I've been working mostly in automotive and engine design development. And so it gives me, like I mentioned before, a bit of a unique perspective on this. And I've had these discussions over the years, and people who claim you're not scientific, but there's a whole lot of people who are scientific, who are Christians. And just because you're not working in one of the sciences doesn't mean you can't be scientific, by the way. Just so that for those of you who may struggle with confidence, getting these conversations, we'll get into that a little bit more, but to not allow yourselves to be bullied, marginalized, or sidelined. So, yeah, let's see here. I'm just trying to get my slide up so I can see it. Okay, so creation worldview. So we're going to go over this just one more time, just as a good reminder of where we started, where we're going. So creation worldview, boldly defend your faith from the beginning to a lost world. I think it's basically the overarching statement for this session. Last week, we did session 1 from the creation account of the fall. Today is session 2, law and theory, evidence and bias. So we'll get into a little more, what is the theory of evolution? Why do people talk about it like it's a law when it isn't? Evidence, bias, how people play into the scientific world and discourse. And then session 3, the flood, fossils, and dinosaurs will be next week. So if that's your thing, make sure you should, 2 weeks, good call. All right, just checking if you're awake. Yeah. But yeah, in 2 weeks. But either way, the next one will be, that actually is one of my favorite. Noah, the ark, the flood. Was it global? I think some of you know that answer already, but fossil record, Darwin said the proof will be there. But let's see if it was or it wasn't. And then dinosaurs. Are dinosaurs in the Bible? Job 40:41, hint. And then session 4, how to engage and stand firm. All right, so that's going to be some of my favorites in there, about 7 top arguments that I've had in discussions that just come to my mind that I tend to have brought up and discussed because they just seem to, I don't know, I guess I align with them. I find them interesting and a good way to engage. But we'll get on to those in a few weeks. So again, the objective here is to be stronger and bolder Christians who rightly divide the truth, to not be corrupted by the foolishness that is so prevalent in our world, by gaining the knowledge, wisdom, and discernment needed to not only defend our faith, but to attack the lies that undermine the spiritual growth of our children, our family, and our friends. So this will be repeated every week, and maybe some of you know this, or maybe you don't, but people need to hear things multiple times for it to be really absorbed and understood. And so what's being said here is being said again, not to be redundant, but just realizing the fact that we all need to hear things a few times, maybe a few different ways before it really settles in and become confident with it. And so it's not a knock on you, it's just reality. So here we go. So we're going to follow up a little bit from last week. There were a few things that I needed to mention, a few astute observation by one in the audience. So following up on a few things here. How's it showing up there? Okay. So a creation account, this is just something to remember because you'll see how important this is later on in this discussion, this conversation about, was it epochs and eons, or was it 24-hour days? And so the creation account, yom, 24-hour days, Hebrew for day. In this context, but there's an easy 10 commandment proof and reminder. It's the 6th commandment in Exodus 28-11, that God did his work of creation in 6 days, and then he rested on the 7th. So it's clearly not ages, it's not mega years, it's not eons, right? It's not a 10 to the 6, a 10 to the whatever number of years. It's 24-hour days. And again, this will become more apparent as we go why that's important, because that belief, basically theistic evolution, is so prevalent and it has corrupted so much of our church. It's extremely disappointing, to tell you the truth, when you look at the numbers. So, and then apologetics, biblical example where Paul addresses the Areopagus was in Acts 17:22-34. So, want to be, make sure that we're being clear and being accurate with what I'm saying. And I think I had done a copy paste and I left Romans back. So it's Acts 17:22-34. If you have notes and references and you want to go correct that. And feel free to give me feedback after the fact. You feel like that was good, that was bad, that was ugly, whatever. I can take it. I'll go cry later. Did anyone, so here's a question. I think there's a couple mics in the audience. There are? Yes. Ooh, I see a mic. I see two. Did anyone, so just a quick share, did anyone have any relevant interactions in the past week? So I believe, my suspicion is that somebody did. Whether or not you want to share it or not is up to you. But I encourage you to, that, did you have a chance to talk to anybody who maybe this came up in conversation, creation versus evolution or whatever worldviews? Anyone? Oh, we got one.
Actually, I did talk to somebody today about creation.
Yeah? How'd it go?
Good. He decided that he was willing to at least read some papers if I collected something for him as evidence that God exists.
Oh, very good. Yes, the axiom, right? So you have to first let them, try the there is a God scenario, not just a no God scenario.
He says he believes that there's a higher power.
Mm-hmm.
What that power is, he is not sure.
Right.
So.
Right. No face, no character, no name.
And that he's lived in both religious home and non-religious. So he's seen both sides and he just wants to go in deeper and study for himself before he, makes a decision in his own life.
It's good. The more you dig, the more the truth comes out. So along the way, you will hit bumps in the road and you'll be like, am I believing a fairy tale? I mean, in high school, when I was digging into it in university, challenged by my friends in engineering and all that, you get shaken. But that builds your faith over time because you come back to the fact that just the Bible keeps proving itself true. And well, excellent. Good job. Anyone else? There we go. You're going to say it for her.
Hello.
Oh.
Okay, so mine was an internet interaction, which usually is, with fellow freedom friends who don't believe in Christ. I'm not sure what she believes in, the person I was interacting with, if it's the universe or atheism. Difficult to draw it out of this person, but her argument pretty much was that people should be empowered themselves, and there's a fundamental flaw with believing in God, that it leads to tyranny, is what her perspective was. I simply told her that, I told her that's not true, and when she had mentioned that there's nothing historical about it, I let her know exactly it's the most historically accurate book known to civilization currently. Mm-hmm. And then some other details that I wrote out. But with some people, you can plant seeds, you just never know when those seeds will sprout or if they ever will. I'd imagine when life gets hard, that's when those seeds will start growing in their mind.
For sure. Yep, you can plant and water, but God makes it grow.
Yeah. And then I always end with God bless.
What's that?
I always end in the conversation with God bless, and they're always happy.
Good. Yeah. It's the little things. Yeah. I mean, amongst all of us, it's a team effort, right? So it's not all on your shoulders to convince that person and pull them over to your side, but along the way, like you say, whatever happens in their life and whatever that timing is, but to be a part of it, right? To not to shrink from the challenge and walk away from it. Awesome. Anybody else? No? Good for now. Is there a hand up? No. Okay. Very good. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, and just to reiterate too, because we went over Genesis 1 to 3 last week, and a little accountability. Anybody read it? All right, we got some hands up. That's good. If you didn't read it, I definitely encourage you to read it. Maybe read it a few times because there's a lot in there. It's very rich with obviously truth, but also information. There's a whole lot to absorb there, and again, that carries through Scripture cover to cover, right? So we shared some verses last week where we got we're in all the way through to Revelation. So I would just say the Bible is the foundation, and there is explanation there, obviously, especially if it's got some concordance or it's a student Bible type deal. And then this is just further explanation, right? This is one of the books that I've referenced. It's not super long, but it's extremely informative and it hits all angles. It's called What is Creation Science? And it's by Gary Parker, Henry Morris and Gary Parker. It covers like everything. It's really good. And it's not crazy long, right? Some of them are a little intimidating, but that one's very good. I got other ones I'll bring next week that go into things that are like the more play into session 3 about the Grand Canyon and dinosaurs, right? Mount St. Helens. There's things like this that are just, it's kind of like, there are like recent examples that prove what we believe that are not spoken of. And I'm going to say on purpose. It is not accidental. So let's get a little deeper into it then. So as we did last week, we're going to get a little bit into definitions. I know maybe sometimes it seems dry, but it's important that we all understand where we're coming from. So in terms of law, there's a legal and there's scientific applications. Legally speaking, it's a system of rules that a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members and may enforce by the imposition of penalties. So, an example, they were taken to court for breaking the law, right? There's been a lot of discussion of that. What are good laws? What are bad laws? Well, that's another discussion, I suppose. But in terms of context today, a scientific law, a statement of fact, deduced from observation, right? Which we all make observations every day, right? We see things, make us curious and question, and that's good. That's healthy and should. To the effect that a particular natural or scientific phenomenon always occurs if certain conditions are present. So an example would be the second law of thermodynamics, right? That entropy of a system tends to increase. That's the randomness of the system. And we'll talk maybe a little bit more about that. But so we think we can all attest to the fact that not all of man's laws, regulations, or mandates are good. But we must always obey God's law over man's law, right? So that's something to remember that. And scientific proof means that it's repeatable, it's reproducible, right? So I could run that test here, in Windsor, Essex County, but I have a procedure, and I can throw that, over the pond, and somebody can maybe test it in the UK, and they can do the same thing. And like, hey, I got the same result. Okay, well, let's keep this going, and then just shop it around. And then before you know it, it's like, this is working out, And so then you develop things like the law of conservation of mass and energy and volume and all that. And so then that's ultimately how it grows and it becomes law. But it is still subject to revision, because if there's new observations and new discoveries, that man's law is subject to being revised based on what you have now learned. God's law, however, no, because the word of God is inerrant. And so it will not be revised. And we have a verse for that later too. So, and then one very key point to make here is that it is not the law of evolution. It is the theories of evolution, right? There isn't one theory of evolution. There's multiple. They're all over the place. Every decade there's something new, right? But they still seem to have hung on to a few of those core, we'll say, tenets of evolution in terms of like gradualism, like over time, you go from something simple to something more complex, lower function, higher function, because of time and chance. And that, somehow that the mechanism has been named, but basically that's how it occurs. And then if you go way back, there's a big bang that happened. It's like, oh, okay. But I have a graphic for that later on, and some comments on that. In terms of theory, though, The meaning may subjectively vary depending on the person and the subject, right? So some people may think it's more established than others, but in general, a theory it's not law. And that's what when we say evolution too, we got to be careful because I always want to say the woke, but that side of the argument will say they like to hijack words, but evolution just means change, right? Change. So what? It evolved, but they mean macroevolution, right? We talked last week, transspeciation, one species to another. We went from a dog to a horse, right? They think the Archaeopteryx was a reptilian bird and that was a lizard and now it's a flying animal. It's like, okay, but it was always the Archaeopteryx. And again, we'll have that more next week. But the point being that that a typical definition of a theory is it's a supposition or a system of ideas intended to explain something, especially one based on general principles, independent of the thing to be explained. So for me in engineering, we develop theories all the time because we're like, what happened? The customer is really angry and something broke. Why did that happen? So we go into what's called a root cause investigation. We'll dig in. Along the way, we develop theories. I think it broke because we didn't select the right material. I think it broke because we oversped the engine, or I think it broke because we ran it lean. We didn't feed enough fuel, or because there's bad conditions, or the customer was abusing the product. But they want to tell the customer that, but sometimes they do. So, yes, but in the end, it's a theory, right? You're trying to hash things out. It's not a law. Okay, enough on that. And we get into evidence. So generally agreed to be facts and figures as indicators of truth. So we would say evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So the study finds little evidence of overt discrimination, as an example, right? So evidence is something that you can actually use to make your case. And then bias, meaning may subjectively vary depending on the person and subject, but we'll say that bias it's prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. Example, there was evidence of bias against foreign applicants. But I'd like to say here too, the antonym of bias would be impartiality, right? Which you would want to be. If you're being truly scientific, you're not allowing yourself to be swayed as you're doing your research, right? You don't have confirmation bias. You're not playing to the outcome that you want. And that's tricky because humans, that's not a natural thing to do. You have an answer in mind and you got to fight the urge to go after it while you're investigating, what, say, the root cause is or what the answer is or, the why to your question. So that's just something to remember, that sometimes stating the complete opposite helps to clarify words and terms, etc. So sometimes it's like, well, I don't really understand what that means. Well, what's the opposite of its meaning, right? And so sometimes that can bring some clarity to the situation. So there's two primary perspectives. We did talk about this, but we're going to talk about this in terms of people, right? So there's a creationist, that God spoke the universe into being out of love. Proverbs 36 says, and we talked about the inerrancy of the Bible, that to do not add to his words, lest he rebuke you and you be found a liar. Right? So this is critically important. And when we're reading and interpreting the Bible, that this is what the Bible, says about itself, right? Do not add to his words, lest he rebuke you and you be found a liar. In Romans 1:20, this is again just restating this because it's the core truth. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. Right? So when somebody says, God, don't know, it's like they do have the proof. They've been walking around this earth. They see the same things you see. They have the same questions you have. They just sometimes are making different conclusions for different reasons. And the why to that takes some conversation, I'm sure. But it's just something to be aware of, right? To have in the back of your mind, to know that the person across from you, or the people for that matter, don't have an excuse. An evolutionist would say is time and chance. They would say time and chance grew the universe by trial and error, ex nihilo, so something out of nothing. But by nothing and by no one. So we would say something out of nothing, but God did it. But they say something out of nothing, and then they stop. And it's like, well, keep going. They're like, nah, time of chance. It's like, so unsatisfying. What are you getting at? And it's like, yeah. So it's just to, again, remember that that's what they believe. An evolutionist believes something out of nothing, but they literally stop there. Now, of course, there are scientific explanations that they will go into, and they'll become very verbose, or they'll give you really pretty pictures. But in the end, the substance of their argument is extremely weak. But unfortunately, the sources are schools. It's all over the internet. It's all over TV. It's in your movies. It's in pop culture. Turn on, watch, like I mentioned before, watch TLC Discovery, CBC, PBS, whatever. And it's like millions of years ago. It's all like, it's so nauseating. Every time I hear it, it just is like nails on a chalkboard. I'm like, this is wrong. So, and to remember too, that the creation account was determined by God to be very good, right? So just another reminder from last session, that the fall obviously was not good. And that was when the first bloodshed occurred, when the animal was sacrificed by God to provide the skin covering for Adam and Eve. And when they realized they were naked following their sin of eating the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So this follows our right interpretation of the biblical creation account within the context it is written as a historical narrative, right? So that's important to remember. It's a historical narrative. People will argue with you all day on that. They will say, no, it's not. It's a fairy tale. It's fiction. It's your crutch. But that is not how it's written. The interpretation of Genesis is a historical narrative. All right. So in terms of what we've been discussing so far, touched on already, biblical authority, that the Bible itself is the best source and it's the best-selling book of all time. I think Stephen mentioned this already a little bit, that it's what he was alluding to and in a sense mentioned was its historicity, right? The number of corroborating documents, I think it's 5,800. It's has extremely high level of historicity. And I have done this, and I guess recommend you do it too. Challenge people to prove to you there's another book, text, writing, what have you, with a higher level of historicity. Make them go do the digging. They're the ones who are new to the game, not us, right? We're the ones with the Bible that's been around forever. And we're the ones who have the truth in our hands. And they're trying to tell you, these rookies, that you're the one who's clueless. It's like, no, you're the one. Put them back on their heels. I think our tendency is sometimes as Christians is to to become defensive. But challenge back and say, you prove to me that the Bible that this is a fairy tale, that I shouldn't believe it, that for some reason it doesn't have, the proof that it does, that it's the most highest historicity of any writing known. And I think the numbers too, they don't even include it on bestseller list anymore because it just blows everything away, right? And it's sort of like, yeah, whatever, but it's the truth. So to say here in terms of Bible authority, that we're intentionally made. Nothing is written to specify or even hint that God used trial and error, right? So again, this is theistic evolution, and this is what I'm getting at. And we'll be highlighting in a little bit. So we're intimately known, right? So it's a very personal process in Psalm 139, 13 to 16. So for you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So there's words in here to pick out. Created, right? Knit me together, right? That means sometimes people will refer to the DNA and the double helix as being like a knitting. So it's maybe a way to kind of think about it. I think about it when I read that. But then that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, right? So we were fearfully and wonderfully made. We weren't like, sort of like God set it up, let it go, and then, just, cue the freak show. Like it says right here that fearfully, wonderfully made, and that your works are wonderful, that again, I was made, I was woven together. Your eyes saw my unformed body. And when I read that one in particular, I think, well, that's That's what we do as designers. We have a blank sheet of paper, and we have to envision what it is that we need to put down on paper and design, and to maybe design in CAD, which is computer-aided drafting, right? It's the three-dimensional, you've seen them online, I'm sure, right? The 3D models that are generated that become the 2D prints, and those 2D prints are what go to the machine shop, and then ultimately that's how you make a widget. But you have to, in your mind, envision the design before you can put it on paper. Otherwise, you're just scribbling, right? It's not going to go anywhere. You have to actually envision what you're going to make. Like, what I want this car to look like. I have to kind of connect parts A and B, so I need a link between two pins. How long and how thick and that kind of thing. So then that's what I see when I read that. I see your eyes saw my unformed body, is that God was the one, he envisioned how he was designing us. And it's not to make it, to bring him down to our level, but just to speak to the fact that he's the one who did design us. So now we're going to get into a little bit of what I was talking about before, about this theistic evolution and the danger of it. And that Christians are playing into these theories, and they're sort of entertaining them. They want to maybe appease their friends. They want to get along with their family. They want more people to come through the doors of their church. And so they're like, well, maybe a little bit of evolution, And it's like, no, 0. But we'll just say that for now, and we'll get into some of this data. So I don't know how well it shows up. You guys can see that all right? So the survey says, right? Indicators of the worldview climate. This is back in 2013. So when I originally did this, I was trying to find Pew Research Center kind of stuff. And this kind of goes back to, this is in 2013 from the Pew Research Center about public views about human evolution. So they've been trying to ask these questions a certain way for like a decade on, right? They're like, how do we ask these questions? And because they're trying to, I would say, rightly divide the truth. They want to drill down as to why do people believe what they believe. And so they're doing, I believe, a good thing. It seems well-intentioned. I read the article on them explaining how they had the questions for the first few years, how they changed them later on. But basically what it's saying here, if you guys can read that a little bit, I'll read it for you. Humans existed in present form since the beginning, right? So that would be created. 33% of all adults. This is 2013. And then humans have evolved over time. 60%, right? So yes, we're in the minority, but we're on the right side of this, I guarantee you. So it doesn't indicate, the way this question was phrased, it doesn't indicate, to read that too, I don't know if you guys can read that, I'll read it for you. Percent of adults saying that humans and other living things have existed in their present form since the beginning of time, or humans and other living things have evolved over time, right? So you see the 33 as we are since the beginning, or evolved over time, 33 to 60. And so it doesn't indicate atheism for the people who said that, but does definitely indicate a gross misunderstanding. So when people are saying humans have evolved over time, they're not necessarily saying there's no God, but they're working into it their own personal leanings. Let's see if I can explain a little bit better here. So breaking it down. So who was believing what in 2013? Those numbers are small. But basically here it's breaking it down. This is here. This is the 33 and the 60 again from before. Oh, wait, you guys can't see oh, there it is. This is the 33 and this is the 60. These are Protestant bars here. And then as we go down, Catholic, there's two different type of, I think, Catholic, and then unaffiliated. And so it's basically what it is, sorry. Oh. So basically, in a sense, becoming less, well, we'll just say that, I'll leave it at that it's, that you're coming down from Protestant, Catholic, and unaffiliated here. So unaffiliated meaning they're not aligning themselves with any particular religion. So that's more for you to be aware of. But I would say that your worldview definitely affects your scientific interpretation. People try to say that if you're religious, that somehow you're less or you're not scientific. That, to me, that is, I find that to be very arrogant, very ignorant, very belittling and demeaning, and basically, how dare you? That's wrong, for somebody to claim that. And so I would say reject that notion if you ever are told that. Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, it's a little small on my end too. So it's processes of human evolution by religion. But yeah, it's not showing up all that well. We'll go to something better. So, same thing here. So this is growing partisan differences in beliefs about evolution. So it's just showing that over time, that the number of people that I will definitely improve this for next time. But it's basically showing that over time, when they asked this originally back in 2009 to 13, how the data was changing. And actually, this is Republicans, this is Democrats, and these are independents. So you can see in 2009 to 2013, it went from a 54 to a 43 for Republicans in terms of that ain't working. It's okay. The whole point here, anyways, is that it's okay. It looked better on my laptop before it got up on that screen. But either way, the point here is that from 2009 to 2013, Republicans and evolving over time, that it did go down a little bit here, flat for Democrats, independents. But it gives you an idea as to if you're wanting politically in terms of your alignment, what does some of that data look like, right? But this is bottom line is it's church, it's Pew Research, and you can definitely go to it. We can send out the link later on so you can get a better look at it. Maybe this is a little bit better. But from 2009 to 2014, roughly 6 in 10 Americans expressed belief in human evolution. So yes, I know these are Americans, but I don't think they're too far off from us. And this is what we have the data for. So that's what I'm using. But in terms of evolved over time, the key takeaway is that 60 to 65% believe we evolved over time in around 2014, and only about 18% believe we always existed in present form. So that is something important to note, right? Like, because the 18%, those are the people who are actually truly creationist. And so again, it's, I don't want to say enemy, but in terms of a debate, know your enemy, know who the other person is, where they're coming from, and that the likelihood is when you run into people that you're gonna have opposition. And this is just showing again the 18% here, and the rest of it are people who believe either they're atheist, they believe that we evolved over time, and the lighter blue bar here in the middle is here. These are your theistic evolutionists. These are the ones who say, well, God started it, but then evolution kept it going. And it's like, that's not biblical. That's not biblical. Go read your Bible, right? That's why I'm saying, go read Genesis 1 to 3. Read it once, twice, 3 times. Read the notes. Get a concordance. Understand it. Because it is seriously undermining the faith of Christians. And maybe you've heard about teenagers, youth walking away, people walking away from the church. Part of it is because they're ridiculed for what they believe and they can't defend it. And that's a sad thing. But it doesn't have to be that way. So this is belief in evolution by religious tradition. There we are. So this is all U.S. adults. So again, here's the 18%. And so evolved, guided by God or higher power. I think somebody mentioned higher power earlier. And, right, evolved due to natural processes. Right, so this is your true evolutionist here. And then this is white evangelical. I don't know why they've separated. It's ridiculous. But Protestants here who believe that existed in their present form here. And then we go down to Catholic and then unaffiliated. So it falls off pretty quick. So yeah, your religion, your faith, and your interpretation of the facts matters. It does. People say, oh, somehow, when you walk into, a boardroom or a debate or to a classroom, you got to check your religion at the door. It's like, no, that my faith helps me understand the world. It doesn't handicap me. It actually helps me, right? Because where does wisdom come from? It comes from God. So if you want to rightly understand information, that I believe truly that comes from God. And people, probably, a lot of them, secular scientists, evolutionists, whatever out there, who would cringe at that, makes them bristle. It's like, oh, that's awful. It's like, hey, maybe not be for you, but I know it to be fact. If I want to understand the world, if I want to understand the Bible, if I want to rightly understand what I'm observing in the world around me, I believe that the Holy Spirit reveals that to us. Rightly so. Otherwise, you can really get off these rabbit trails here. This is just about what the people thought about what... Well, here you go. This is scientists and beliefs about human evolution. So % who believe humans and other living things have evolved over time. So this association, this AAS scientists here, 98% of that group of scientists anyways, believe that we have evolved over time. 2% believe we exist in present form from the beginning. And again, that's according to this survey anyways. And then % of adults who say that most biological scientists think. So the bottom bar here is people's perceptions of what scientists think, right? So there's the scientists themselves, what they think. Apparently it's 98%. I think they have to talk to more scientists, personally. And then the one on the bottom, though, is what people think of what these scientists think. Yes?
I just want to share something about this data. I've looked into this stuff before, and when they say scientists working at a university. So it's not any scientist worldwide, because if you ask a doctor is a scientist, but they wouldn't count as a scientist because they're not working at a university. Yeah. So that's something important.
That's a good point. Yeah. The definition of who a scientist is and who's allowed to answer the survey, I guess, would play into this directly. But it does show here, though, what a person's thought is on what scientists think. So people think scientists, and people, though they also, to an extent, revere scientists, right? They're like, oh, please tell me, And it's like, well, that scientist is a human too. Yes, they may be educated. Yes, they may be higher learned. Yes, they may have a lot of experience in their research, but they're also human and they're also fallible. So no reason to ever worship or revere any other human being. Can you respect the fact that they know a lot and can teach you a lot? Sure. But they also have their biases. And so, but that shows that people tend to think, that scientists think that we all evolved, or that in general, the majority here, it's 76%. And that they think only 23% would say that humans have always existed in their present form. So, yeah, that's, I guess, a little more about what people think, but it's just another way to look at the other 88% and, who don't believe that we have existed in our present form from the beginning. So, what is happening inside the so-called God-fearing and Bible-believing community, right? This is out there. I mean, in a previous church, I had this discussion. I was on the board, and I was like, we need to teach creation. I think people are confused. They don't understand. People who are Christians, who are middle-aged, golden years, who don't have answers. They don't. And they're actually, because when I taught this previously, they would come up to me after the class and take me aside and be like, hey, did dinosaurs walk with humans or not? I'm like, you're a grown man, ask the question, but they're shy. They're scared. They're a little embarrassed that they don't already know. But let's say it's important that we get over that and ask the questions, because, like I said before, it does cause a certain insecurity to a Christian to not understand their worldview. So people, including Christians, have been deceived. And this was in the article related to the data that I showed from Pew Research Center, that the latter choice in this question provided what many view as middle ground in the evolution debate. A worldview encompassing both evolution and God, which to some degree aligns with what has been called intelligent design. So this article, it's transparent, right? They're showing how they did what they did, but they're stating something that based on their findings is true, that this is prevalent, that people will put together God and evolution. But like we talked before in the Genesis account, and in the fall, these are mutually exclusive. So we have to rightly divide that truth, that these are mutually exclusive positions as a creationist or evolutionist. We cannot have very good and, this freak show of bloodshed that we mentioned before within the same beginnings as detailed in Genesis. The two can't coexist. I hate those bumper stickers too, by the way. You guys ever see those bumper stickers? Let's coexist. It's like, let's all get along. It's like, we can't all get along because everything you got on there disagrees with each other. It's just the way it is. But yeah, don't like those bumper stickers. Intelligent design. Intelligent design is a theory that the universe and its complex life forms cannot be explained solely by natural causes, and thus an intelligent higher power contributed to the origins of the universe. So it's recognizing the fact that the order in the universe, right? So just the complexity of life and how strong gravity is, right? And all the various laws that do exist, that they couldn't just happen randomly. And so we're saying, let's recognize that at least teach that other side in schools, but they don't. And like what was mentioned earlier, what's happening in schools, we mentioned before, the movie Expelled by Ben Stein, recommend watching that. And it goes into how these universities get their grants, what they do to professors, even tenured professors who speak out and say, well, I want to speak to both sides, and how they are attacked. They are attacked. They are basically ridiculed out of their job, maybe even fired. It's a movie to watch. I haven't watched it in a while. Probably worth watching again, but definitely recommend it. But even to ask them to say, okay, don't put God's name on it, then at least teach the other side to this, and still unwilling to do it. Am I a proponent of intelligent design? I say God did it. So I think sometimes, but it's important to show both sides, and creation is by God. So intelligent design is said to be a pseudoscientific argument for the existence of God. That's what it's claimed to be, presented by its proponents as an evidence-based. This is the Wikipedia definition. Let me start again. This is what Wikipedia said it was. Intelligent design is a pseudoscientific argument for the existence of God, presented by its proponents as, and it puts this in quotes, an evidence-based scientific theory about life's origins, right? So when you Google something, when you search, obviously, whatever you get hits on, it may not be really giving you anything good. Pseudoscience, meaning a collection of beliefs or practices mistakenly regarded as being based on the scientific method, right? So somehow these people, they claim this higher ground, and they're telling you that what you're thinking is stupid. But a truly scientific approach means that you're going to be neutral in how you're approaching the problem. But that is not what we see and what's presented, and definitely not what's not taught in schools. So theory of evolution proponents, they do claim scientific superiority, but have no basis for saying so, because they readily admit that the Big Bang was a one-time event, but you can't go back and recreate that Big Bang. So we would say God spoke the universe into existence, but we can't repeat that. Neither can they. And so it's good, you got to drive that home, remember that, because they're claiming that somehow because NASA said so, or some internet website has a pretty picture, that, well, this has got to be true. But that is not the case, and it's actually rather weak. So I would say absolute foolishness. The Big Bang Theory is a product of pure fantasy, but yet it lives on. If you go online, if you go onto NASA website and you look up Big Bang, you will see something like this. Again, but basically it starts, it's almost comical. It says, Big Bang. Thanks. Question marks. Well, that's specific. Then it gets into, I don't know, I think that's Pac-Man right there. See that? And then, oh, look, we got ourselves some hills. And then I think they're gamma rays. And then it's just like, okay, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom. But along the way, there's these question marks and these, well, maybe, I don't know. And they just say like, well, we're still researching. It's like, they lack the humility to even give creation science a try. And so you can go look this up. Just look up Big Bang Theory and you get a bunch of images, but it is on the NASA website. I got another picture later on. So in God we trust. So maybe you've heard this before, and you can use this one when people come to you and they're telling you, what to think. Say, in God we trust, all others bring data, right? I don't trust you just because you're loud and you're convincing and maybe you got certain degrees, a degree or you got many. You need to have good data. So, and to remember this too, we've experienced this in the past few years, numbers don't lie, but people do. Okay? Remember that. Numbers don't lie, but people do. And how they're defining terms and how they're using words, it all matters. So in this case here, the Big Bang, the geologic column, and fish to man as if factual. So Darwin's backstory, I think it's important to note this, that this is in The Origin of the Species. This is in Darwin's own book. He was actually he was more of an unbiased scientist than we give him credit for, despite his book and how it's been popularized. But he writes this in his book. In the 4 succeeding chapters, the most apparent and gravest difficulties on the theory will be given. Right? So he goes into the difficulties of transition, how you go from a simple being or a simple organ can be changed and perfected into a highly developed being or elaborately constructed organ. Also, the subject of instinct or the mental powers of animals. Thirdly, hybridism or the infertility of species and the fertility of varieties when intercrossed. And fourthly, the imperfection of the geological record. So Darwin himself is like, hey, I don't think I have this one all wrapped up, just so you know. But then what happened was there were people who popularized the theory, and then it became more part of like culture. And I think it really lost this more scientific presentation. We'll see if I go on to. So he also, to me, this played into it. That is, he had a Christian wife, Emma, considered to have restrained Darwin with his theories. And the 3 children died, and then Annie died at age 10 in 1851, his one child. Then he published in 1859. I have a hard time believing that somehow that didn't affect what he was doing at the time. That's conjecture, but I'm just saying, Charles Darwin has a personal story too, right? And what was happening in his life at the time when he wrote this book and all of it. So take that into context. So what we're told and not told. So I have some pretty pictures, so I'll get a little more colorful for you now, hopefully, if you're sticking with me. So the real title to the infamous book by Darwin. This, I think, is rather huge. So if you go into The Origin of the Species, The Means of Natural Selection, and then you drill down to the subtitle below it, it says, so it's on the origin of species by means of natural selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Right? So at the time, and what's being said here, when people who support this origin of species, I think it's racist. And so if you read the full title, that is the full title right there, Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. So I think this is the type of thinking that was the evil spawn behind eugenics, right? Who's more fit to live, right? That was more in the early 1920s, and then even continued in some places until I think it was the 1980s or so. But this thinking still exists today, that there are some who are more fit to live than others, and it shapes abortion, euthanasia, right, and all the rest of it. This is the that disgusting underbelly to what's happening in our culture. So it's a depraved ideology that certain humans are having a more innate fitness level to exist in others. So the woke crazies of this world try to teach God-fearing and Bible-believing people about racism. Meanwhile, they perpetuate it with their worldview and what I call mental excrement, such as CRT, which is deeply offensive and loser material, right? Critical race theory. That people, because of the color of your skin, you are always going to be the oppressor, and you can never get ahead in life because of your color of skin. And it's a skin tone. Like even the idea of races, to me, I don't. It's this, you have different skin tones. It's a variation within the human within people. I think that's where we need to leave it. But unfortunately, it politicized and used for political gain. So in God we trust, all our other bring data. Again, what we're told and what we're not told. So the Big Bang, that it violates laws of non-contradiction, cause and effect, entropy, and conservation of mass and energy. It's ex nihilo, like we said, something from nothing, by nothing, and no one. It's ludicrous. This right here is the NASA image that you will see if you go on their website and you look up Big Bang. I believe it's still there. But you can see here at the beginning of time and space and matter is the infinitesimally small dot that contained all of the universe. No joke. This is what they say. And then, boom, somehow it radiates in the sort of like funnel lake shape from no life to simple life to more complex life. And then somehow, some way, you get human beings in the animal kingdom. To an extent, it's laughable, I believe, but they're serious. And for me as an engineer, and I studied combustion in university, and that was part of my engine development experience. Intake compression, power exhaust, any gearheads out there, right? But that's what the piston does in the cylinder. Okay. But the point being is that when you combust that, you have fuel, air, and you combust it, the flame front propagates spherically, right? It just grows, it expands. But the deal here is that you're not increasing order, right? You're bringing order to it by how you've designed the engine, but they call it an explosion, but it's actually called deflagration. It's a subsonic flame propagation. But the whole point is that the disorder is increasing. So how do you go how is it that here order is increasing when it really is decreasing? And that's what I'm getting at. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't align. This geologic column here, and we'll go into this more next time around, this is what they would say basically is a geologic column and how the fossils are buried, so on and so forth. And that's what you'll see in a textbook, right? It's a nice artist rendering. But the fact is that if somebody tells you, look at the fossil record. It's like, no, you go look at the fossil record. That geologic column occurs nowhere on Earth. It's an artist's rendering. Ask them to go tell you where that occurs. What's that? Yeah, so there is evidence of rapid sedimentation, right? Stasis, I think it's called stasis, but it's like where it traps the fossils quickly. There's some pretty cool pictures out there, actually. I got that next time around. And then this here, this is basically what they're saying in terms of fish to man, right? This is an artist rendering, but the transition links, they are truly missing. And you can see it goes from primordial ooze, maybe that's a tadpole, mud puppy, and it's like, look, we have some apes, got a human, and then we're polluting the water we came out of. It's actually a cartoon, but that was fun. So, yeah, and then that's true. And it literally, but I would say also intellectually, we're polluting ourselves with garbage. So there are great creationist scientists, Newton, Faraday, Maxwell, Kelvin, Boyle, Dalton, Pascal, Ramsey, Ray, Linnaeus, Mendel, Pasteur, Steno, Woodward, Brewster, Agassiz, and then Kepler, Galileo, Herschel, Maunder. So this list was in this book, and it's just so people, because you get told something completely different, right? Like, there's no scientists on your side. It's like, yeah, there are. There's a whole list of them, famous ones too. But there's also ones who are, they signed petitions, like we'll get into, I think I have an example of that here in a second here, but Darwin was less confident than his biggest fans. So the people I was referring to who popularized the theory of evolution, it wasn't really Darwin himself. It was T.H. Huxley and Herbert Spencer who popularized the origin of species to selfishly prove design without creation. So I think they were farmers, but they had something against the church. Whole other story. You can go down that rabbit hole if you want. But the point being, it wasn't Charles Darwin really that popularized it so much. It was these two guys, and then the high schools picked it up, universities, right? And they control you with your money. You want to keep your job, that, and also, not to always bring out the Hitler and all our arguments here, but Hitler was an evolutionist. So this is from Evolution Ethics, that the German Führer, as I have consistently maintained, is an evolutionist. He has consciously sought to make the practice of Germany conform to the theory of evolution. So, bad company, right? And not that we want to, pull up, the Hitler argument when you're talking to an evolutionist, but just for you to know, you're not in good company on the evolutionist side of things. So, there's hidden bias. So, in terms of punctuated equilibrium, hopeful monsters. So what they will say then is like, well, if gradualism didn't actually work, right? If we didn't actually just all of a sudden okay, over time, this is what we'll see. We're going to go from a single-celled organism to this complex life, like a human being. So then they're like, well, that's not what we're seeing. Come up with something better. Punctuated equilibrium, all right? So it shows up in the fossil record and it kind of stays there. Or hopeful monsters actually was one way that's like all of a sudden it's like we dig, we see this, but we don't find any of the transitional fossils, so that's what they call it. So to me, though, it sounds to me like God's creation account without saying God's creation account, right? They're saying, look, this is what this organism is. It's full, it's complete, we found Archaeopteryx, right? Because it's something it's a reptilian bird. But it's always complete. But they're like, well, that's a hopeful monster. It's like, you guys are awful. It's like, why can't you give ground on this? And really, in the back of their mind, the smartest people are very intelligent people they can fool themselves extremely well because they know where they don't want their mind to go, right? They don't want their bubble popped. So there's a climate change example too, just to get on this hidden bias thing. It's not evolution, but proponents claim that the science is settled by 600 scientists sympathizers that man must save the earth from destruction. However, over 30,000 scientists disagree. So if you go to petitionproject.org, you will see there's a whole lot of scientists that say, hey, stop the nonsense, stop the fear mongering. There's no way that you guys can really track and model a 1.5 degrees Celsius change, over decades. But that's what we're told all the time. Right? It was global cooling in the 70s, by the way, and then it was global warming, right? And then it was, then it was then it was climate crisis. And it's like, well, it's climate change. It's like, yeah, I think we can all agree on that. It's changing. Thanks. But, so the final word is the supremacy of God, right? So in Colossians 1:15-17, this speaks to, again, as Christians, believing in the inerrant word of God, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. So we're talking both physical and, I say maybe the social design of things, relationships, government, and the rest of it. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. So, I truly believe if God said it, if he pulled the pin, I think, all the molecular forces that hold this world together would come apart. I truly believe that. You're like, that's crazy. It's like, well, those molecular forces exist for a reason, right? There's a reason why we have gravity, magnetism, why certain molecules have a stronger bond than others, right? You have surface tension on water, but somehow within the crystalline structure of steel, right, of metal, it actually has a strong bond, so you can't just break it, right? Why is that, right? Why is it that we have so many materials we can select from and build with, It's not a mistake. It's not a mistake. So, yeah, I think that's an important thing. But one thing I'll say too is that the idea of equilibrium. So if you have a ball that's at the top of a hill, right? Where does the ball want to go? To the bottom of the hill, because that's the lowest state of energy, right? And it wants to stay there. It's not going to naturally climb the other side of the hill, right? So if you have a big bang, right, that energy that occurred, and I don't know what initiated the combustion, because in an engine, it's either it's heat and pressure, or it's an ignition source like a spark plug, right? It doesn't just kick off on its own unless you've designed it to do that, right? In a diesel engine, it's auto ignition, spark ignition, and a gasoline. But the whole point is that it doesn't just happen. It's ignited. So whatever kicked off the Big Bang, I don't know. Well, we'll just give them that. We'll spot you that one. So bang, it grows, but the energy is dissipating, it's decreasing. How does it happen that it actually then somehow, as this energy is being dissipated, how is it that there's now energy to actually cause all of that matter to reach a higher level, right, of form and function? It doesn't make sense. So there are so many fundamental problems to what the evolutionist is saying, and then they have ways of explaining it, their way around it, I suppose. But the second law of thermodynamics is a big one. It's entropy, that the randomness of a system will increase over time, right? So walk into a teenager's room, right? So they cleaned it. What happens in a week? It's a mess. So it's kind of an example of what it is, right? Something will tend to just decay and reach a lower state of energy. So it doesn't make sense that the universe as a system increases in form and function over time. It doesn't make any logical sense. But I guess we'll end it there. If anybody has any quick adds, feel free if you've got a question. Otherwise, I think we're a bit over the hour mark, and I'll go on to the closing. Yep. Thanks for sticking with me. I know that was a little bit of a longer one. So next session is session 3, the flood, fossils, and dinosaurs. So that'll be a really cool one. I think you'll like it. I'll like it anyways. I'll be here. I hope you're all back. 2 weeks. I said it again, I think. So the pre-reading for this one anyways is Genesis 6-9, Luke 19:37-40, and don't forget Job 40-41. But don't go straight to Job 40-41. That's cheating. You have to read Genesis, and if you didn't read Genesis 1-3, read that. Genesis 6-9, Luke 19:37-40, and then Job 40-41. That'll be the dessert, if you're like me. But it's really cool. But so thank you. I think you guys got small group numbers. Okay, so I'll just close in prayer because there's a lot to absorb, and I just want God to bless what we've heard, that maybe if I didn't explain it all that well, He'll help you explain it to yourself. So thank you, Lord, for gathering us here today. Thank you for this opportunity to share your truth, hear your truth, and there is so much to know, so much to learn, but we know that we need to gain knowledge, and that through you we can gain wisdom and discernment and rightly divide the truth, because we are surrounded by lies and liars, people who will mislead us, whether for their own personal reasons or whatever it may be. In the end, it doesn't matter, but pray that you would help us to defend our faith and to stand strong, and to pray and to really bring order to the chaos in this lost world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.